Dallas-Fort Worth has more highway lane miles per capita than any other major metro in America. More than Houston, more than Los Angeles, more than Chicago, and it still ranks in the top 5 most congested cities in the country. In 2015, Texas Department of Transportation finished a $2.7 billion reconstruction of I-635, the LBJ freeway, projected to reduce congestion by 15%. Within 3 years, travel times on that corridor were measurably longer than before construction began. Texas Department of Transportation is now proposing to expand I-35 through downtown Dallas to more than 20 lanes, the widest urban highway in America. Stand downtown and look in any direction. You see elevated concrete at every horizon. This is not a city that failed to invest in its roads. This is a city that proved, with billions of public dollars, that the entire theory behind American highway building is wrong and about to spend billions more doing it again. The numbers should be impossible. Dallas-Fort Worth has more highway infrastructure per person than any comparable metro in the country. Houston is often cited as the car dependency capital of America, but DFW has it beat. Los Angeles, Chicago, Phoenix, none of them come close to the lane mile per capita figure that DFW has quietly accumulated over 6 decades of construction. And yet, every year, the Texas A&M Transportation Institute publishes its Urban Mobility Report, and every year, Dallas-Fort Worth sits in the top 5 most congested metro areas in the nation, alongside Los Angeles, alongside New York, cities that built far less road per resident and carry far more people. The LBJ freeway tells that story in numbers. I-635 runs east-west across the northern part of Dallas. It carries over 200,000 vehicles per day. By the early 2000s, it had become one of the most congested corridors in Texas, so Texas DOT rebuilt it. The project broke ground in 2011 and was completed in 2015. The price tag was $2.7 billion. It added managed express lanes, widened the main lanes, and reorganized the interchanges. The official projection, a 15% reduction in congestion. By 2018, researchers at the Texas A&M Transportation Institute documented that travel times on I-635 were longer, measurably longer than they had been before construction began. $2.7 billion, 3 years of active roadwork, and the outcome was worse than the starting point. There is a name for what happened. Engineers and transportation economists call it induced demand, and it is the reason Dallas is trapped. Induced demand is not a complicated idea, but it is one that the highway building industry has spent decades treating as a fringe concern. Here is the mechanism. When a city adds highway lanes, travel on that corridor gets faster, temporarily. That temporary speed improvement does 2 things at once. It pulls drivers who were avoiding the route back onto it, and it unlocks development further out along the corridor. Subdivisions, office parks, warehouses, retail strips that would not have been financially viable before the expansion. Those developments generate new commuters. Those commuters fill the new lanes. Within 5 years, the corridor is back to where it started, or worse. This is not theory. In 2011, economists Jill Duranton and Matthew Turner published a study in the American Economic Review examining lane miles growth and vehicle miles traveled across U.S. metro areas over nearly 2 decades. Their finding, for every 1% increase in lane miles, vehicle miles traveled increased by approximately 1% within 5 years, near 1 to 1. They called it the fundamental law of road congestion. The road does not absorb demand. The road creates it. Look at a satellite map of DFW, then look at one of Amsterdam at the same population scale, or Barcelona, or Copenhagen. In those cities, you see a dense grid with transit radiating from a center. In Dallas, you see a web of elevated concrete with low-density development spreading in every direction, organized entirely around highway access. Every expansion made the next expansion inevitable. More lanes meant more sprawl. More sprawl meant more commuters. More commuters meant more lane miles needed. The machine fed itself. Victor Turner has lived in Oak Cliff for 19 years. Oak Cliff is a neighborhood on the southern side of Dallas, just across the Trinity River from downtown. His small business, a printing and design shop, sits about 11 miles from the suppliers and distribution connections he needs in the northern part of the metro. 11 miles. In most cities, that is nothing. In Dallas, on I-35E, that 11-mile trip takes him between 55 and 75 minutes on a normal workday. He has watched Texas DOT work on that corridor twice in the 12 years he has been making that drive. The first round stretched from 2009 to 2012. Construction delays, lane closures, detours through surface streets that wasn't built for the volume. Then a brief window, maybe 18 months, when it seemed like the work had helped. Then worse than before. The second round came in the late 2000 teens. Same sequence, same result. He is not an outlier. The city's own data confirms it. Average commute times in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro have lengthened every decade since 1990, without interruption, despite continuous highway construction and billions spent on capacity expansion. Now Texas DOT has published its proposal for I-35 through downtown Dallas. The plan would widen the highway to more than 20 lanes in some sections. To accomplish that, Texas DOT would need to demolish structures within the existing right-of-way and push into adjacent neighborhoods. The corridor runs directly through Oak Cliff. Victor Turner's block is in the expansion zone. He has been to the public hearings. He has submitted written comments. He has organized neighbors who have also submitted comments. And none of that changes the fundamental reality. Texas DOT is a state agency operating on state-designated corridors. The city of Dallas has no authority to stop it. His commute will not improve. His neighborhood may not survive the solution. To understand why Dallas keeps building highways that make traffic worse, you have to understand a document called the Highway Capacity Manual. The first edition was published in 1950 by the Highway Research Board. It was revised significantly in 1965. The core concept it introduced, and that Texas adopted into state transportation law, is level of service grading, or LOS. LOS grades road segments on a scale from A to F, just like a school report card. An A means traffic flows freely. An F means the road is operating over capacity. The grades are calculated based on vehicle throughput, how many cars pass through per unit of time, relative to how many the road was designed to carry. Texas law effectively requires Texas DOT to expand any corridor grading D or F. That sounds rational. If a road is failing, fix it. But here is the structural problem. The LOS system measures vehicle volume, not transportation outcomes. It does not measure how many people move efficiently. It does not measure whether surrounding land use is generating more trips than any road can handle. It does not reward alternatives. It counts cars, and when the count gets too high, the law says, add more lanes. And here is the loop. Texas DOT adds lanes. New lanes attract development. Development generates new vehicle trips. Those trips push the LOS grade back to D or F, which triggers the legal mandate to expand again. The funding structure reinforces this. Federal highway dollars, distributed through the Federal Highway Administration under formulas with roots in the Federal Aid Highway Act and its successors, have historically tracked lane mile construction. Building lanes gets money. Reducing trips does not. There is no equivalent mandate in Texas law requiring Texas DOT to reduce congestion through transit investment, land use coordination, or demand management. No funding formula rewards those outcomes. The system was designed to expand highways, so it expands highways. The construction industry benefits. The land development industry benefits. Every new corridor opens fresh suburban rings for commercial and residential projects. The engineering firms on Texas DOT contract have been on perpetual retainer for decades. Dallas is not a city that keeps making the same mistake. It is a city inside a machine that was built to produce that mistake indefinitely. The science behind induced demand has been in circulation since 1969. That year, urban planning theorist Anthony Downs published a paper in Traffic Quarterly articulating what he called the triple convergence principle, the idea that new highway capacity would attract drivers from alternative routes, alternative times, and alternative modes until the new lanes were as congested as the old ones. The mechanism was documented, named, and published more than 50 years ago. By 1994, economists were building on Downs' framework with empirical data. The work that would eventually become the fundamental law of road congestion had precursor studies circulating in transportation economics literature through the 1990s. In 2000, the Victoria Transport Policy Institute published a comprehensive summary of induced demand evidence that was widely cited in transportation planning circles. Texas DOT was aware. The agency's own environmental impact review for the I-635 LBJ reconstruction, published in 2013, acknowledged induced demand as a known effect of highway expansion. It acknowledged that new capacity would attract new trips. It projected a 15% congestion reduction anyway. The 2019 draft environmental impact statement for the I-35 expansion through downtown Dallas referenced induced demand in a footnote, then projected congestion relief. The Dallas City Council passed a resolution in 2019 opposing Texas DOT's I-35 expansion plan, citing neighborhood damage, increased pollution, and direct contradiction of the city's own transportation goals. Texas DOT continued the project development process. It had no legal obligation to stop. The city of Dallas has no authority over state-designated highway corridors running through its own borders. In 2020 and 2022, transportation researchers testified before the Texas legislature about the LOS mandate, the induced demand problem, and the structural feedback loop behind decades of failed expansion. The legislature declined to reform the standard. The evidence was in the room. The studies were cited. The mechanism was named in Texas DOT's own documents, and the process moved forward because the process was not designed to respond to evidence. It was designed to respond to LOS grades, and the grades kept failing. That is not ignorance. That is a system operating exactly as designed. In 2016, the city of Dallas adopted a complete streets policy. It was a genuine attempt to redirect street design at the municipal level, to require that new and reconstructed city streets accommodate pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users alongside drivers. Cities like Seattle, Minneapolis, and Washington District of Columbia had adopted similar policies and pointed to measurable improvements in transportation diversity and neighborhood livability. The Dallas Complete Streets policy applies to city-owned streets. Texas Department of Transportation controls I-35, I-635, I-30, and I-20. Those are not city streets. They are state infrastructure. The Complete Streets policy has zero authority over any of them. Dallas passed a transportation reform that legally exempts every major artery in the city. The second apparent solution was already in place: DART, the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System. By track miles, DART operates one of the largest light rail networks in the United States. It opened its first line in 1996 and has expanded repeatedly since. On paper, it is exactly the kind of transit infrastructure a congested, car-dependent metro needs. DART's ridership per mile of track is among the lowest of any comparable light rail system in America. The reason is not the trains. The reason is what surrounds the stations. DART was built into a city that highways had already shaped. Station areas across most of the network have no walkable density, no mixed-use development, no street grid connecting to daily destinations. The dominant access pattern at most DART stations is park and ride. Drivers leave their car in a surface lot, take the train downtown, then pick up another car at the other end. DART is not functioning as a transit alternative. In its current form, it is an auxiliary car trip system embedded inside a highway-scaled city. The fix proved the depth of the problem. You cannot build transit into a land-use pattern that highways already determined. The sprawl came first. The stations arrived decades too late to reshape it, and the highways that made the sprawl possible are still being expanded. Go back to that downtown Dallas skyline, the one ringed by elevated concrete in every direction. That is not a city that neglected its roads. That is a city legally and financially required to keep building them by a mandate rooted in 1965 engineering document, funded by federal formulas that count lane miles instead of outcomes, defended by an industry that profits from every new construction cycle, and insulated from local democratic control by state preemption. The I-35 expansion through downtown Dallas will almost certainly be built. When it opens, travel will briefly improve. Then development will fill in around the new lanes. Vehicle miles will accumulate. The level of service grade will fall back to D or F. And someone at Texas DOT will open the highway capacity manual, run the numbers, and start the next project. Victor Turner's commute will not improve. Dallas has spent more money per resident on highway infrastructure than any comparable American metro. It has the congestion numbers of a city that built nothing. And the legal and funding structure that produced that outcome is still intact, still operating, still expanding. The highway grid around that downtown skyline is not a monument to bad luck. It is the physical residue of a system built to grow itself regardless of what it produced. Dallas didn't build its way into congestion by accident. It built its way in on purpose, with a formula, a funding stream, and a law that made sure there was no other option.